Hey, welcome into Dom Time. Thanks for joining us tonight. A new feature on the Dom Giordano program. We'll be devoting in our new lineup a show a week to Dom's Weekly Roundup, where we bring in an esteemed pundit or somebody in the media or a couple of those folks, and we go back and forth with them and with you. You can certainly call in about items that are in the news and maybe sometimes, too, when appropriate, how those items have been covered. And there has been a ton of scrutiny on the media recently because of the way the coverage of Boston was and any number of inaccuracies, and also because of the Gosnell trial and the the absent without leave media, including the New York Times and others. Joining us is somebody who's covered all the great and near great in our area. He's a former Daily News columnist, currently a media and communications professional, maybe a little bit of crisis management thrown in there. Dan Gross, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Dom. Appreciate your invitation.
Well, Dan, I know one of the things we discussed that we're going to do with Dom's Weekly Roundup is to talk with people like you that have vast media experience. And one of the issues that's been out there this week is accuracy. Viewers at home know, and in our business, getting it out there, being first with it, sometimes is the major thing versus getting it right. We saw John King inaccurately talk about somebody who was dark complected that he had from the FBI or the bombers in Boston, and really had tremendous egg on his face. Talk a little bit about accuracy and what you did as a columnist covering some of the celebrities and related matters in Philadelphia.
Accuracy is obviously the most important thing in journalism, but it is also, you really are under a lot of pressure to be first, especially with a story that a lot of people are covering. A lot of stuff that I wrote about, well, pretty much everything I wrote about was far less significant to the world than a real breaking news emergency story involving terrorism, like the Boston situation. So a lot of times I wouldn't necessarily be competing with someone, instantly in that kind of situation. So it was a little easier to take a little more time and step back and make sure that your facts were accurate before you went with something. But I feel like what's happened now is that with the news cycle that we're in, with cable news, radio, the internet, social media, everyone wants to know as much as they can about anything.
So the viewer, the listener is driving this. They're getting what they want versus the news media screwing up and not following journalism.
Oh, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I don't think the public wants to get misinformation, but I do think the public wants to get as much information about whatever's going on as they possibly can. So, they want to receive accurate information, but what you have is the media then vying to get the eyeballs or ears or Twitter follows or whatever it might be of all these people who were looking for this information.
Twitter.
And then it becomes,
let's talk about that too. Sorry to stop you down,
No.
but boy, that has resulted, has it not, in just how many misinformation, wild things, and any number of athletes seem to particular. I'd take away their Twitter account if they signed for $1 million.
Right.
What's driving that, your experience with that when you get to the bottom of Twitter and things like that?
Personally, I mean, I think Twitter has totally changed the way that news is reported, and even just the media landscape. If you look at television now, you see, someone's Twitter handle is underneath their name, or even on a commercial it has a hashtag or Twitter address. That's just something that media and networks and whoever it is are trying to direct their people to. I mean, I can't think. I totally agree with you about athletes flying off the handle or people, tweeting something that they then regret. But in terms of reporting, I mean, I can't think of a significant news event in the last probably 2 years or more that I didn't hear about first on Twitter. Now, maybe that's because I'm always,
No, I think
scrolling down
you're
my
exactly
phone.
right. But the amount of misinformation, something like Boston, we had to know, what's the harm of that, do you think? What do you see as being responsible as the harm of the misinformation? It harms the person, they lose their credibility,
Right.
But what kind of harm is there out there in general to anybody else because of that?
Well, I think part of the harm is, if I were to tweet something that's inaccurate, by the time I might fix it and say the true version or correct my mistake, it might have gotten retweeted, a couple hundred or 1,000 times. So at that point, you don't know who's seeing it. It's not just your followers, it's the followers of your followers, and it's really taken on a different life. And then you can only hope that when you make the correction and get the accurate version out there, that item, that tweet is getting the same kind of
Now, when
reach.
you were covering for the Daily News, what kind of corroboration would you go before you went with something? What do you have to know, particularly something that might be hurtful to somebody, to put in the paper? What did you have to do?
if I had something that I thought was actually potentially hurtful to a subject, I would at least make sure that that person knew that I was working on the story. I would make every effort to reach the individual. Sometimes they don't want to talk to you, or they dodge you, and that's fine. That's their right. But I need them to understand that something that they might be upset about is going to be in the paper the next day. Once that had happened, if it was something that I knew was accurate, and I knew that the person knew that it was coming, then it was fair, and we would run it.
Coming up, we'll talk with Dan Gross in our weekly roundup, and with you can get in about the Gosnell trial and the media's seeming lack of interest in that. A lot has been talked about. Is it a juicy story? Is it a story of significance, as I believe it is? And also we have a story, is this a story of significance? We have the first major pro athlete that I know of that has actually gone to some media source and said that he's gay and that he's out today. And we have the reaction of the top basketball guy on ESPN. His name is Broussard, who is a minister, saying that this is a sin. We'll talk with Dan Gross about both next here on Dom Time.